Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third edition of Open Canvas for Brainstorm School Online. My name is Thomas Broyante. I will be your co-host slash moderator this evening with the esteemed Logan Feliciano, one of my good friends and pals for many, many years, and now current instructor here at Brainstorm School Online. If you have never attended a Open Canvas event, they're a little bit different than our workshops. They're kind of open formatted. We like to keep it that way. This is about engaging you guys, making sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions. So folks, if you have questions, there's a couple ways to do that. You can put them into the chat feature. You can raise your hand, and at some point or another, we'll actually go to live questions as well. And this afternoon and evening is all about Logan and a presentation of our DC speed painting. So that is our digital painting, speed painting course that we have here at Brainstorm. We also have some stuff in store for you being an attendee. So again, thank you for hanging out with us this Wednesday evening. Some of you are in different time zones, and I know it's late where you're at. So I will turn it over to Logan without further ado. So Logan, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Cool. Well, thank you for the introduction, Thomas, and hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for taking the time, wherever you are in the world, to come and join us for this. I appreciate it. It's about 10 p.m. My time, so if any of you guys are kind of burning the midnight oil, like I'm going to be in a bit, thanks for joining me on this. A little bit about myself. I'm a concept artist and illustrator for video games and card games and board games. Some of my clients include Visual Games, back when they were alive, down in Austin, Texas. I've had the pleasure of doing card illustrations for Fantasy Flight Games, as well as recently some stuff for Wizards of the Coast, for Magic the Gathering. I've also had the pleasure, kind of here and there, working with West Studio out in Pasadena, doing kind of some miscellaneous projects here and there, some of which was for Blizzard Entertainment and for some unannounced stuff that I can't talk about due to NDA. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and my background. If you like, Thomas, I can kind of go through and perhaps like share a bit of my portfolio if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Uh,
going to make you presenter and take it away and roll. So you
okay.
have control now.
All right.
Logan, you're based out there in Michigan now.
Yeah, I'm currently living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So kind of getting a little bit of the Midwest treatment of the spring weather.
And I'm going to give a little bit of background information on Logan up and beyond that. So sorry about that. But actually,
No worries.
Logan and me actually met many, many moons ago at another school that I used to work for. And he was attending there that didn't have a very strong concept art program. I used to do quite a bit of workshops, and Logan used to attend those workshops and hang out. And then I actually saw him carve away his own curriculum and his own path in his education, where he found a way to adapt and audit and supplement his education to study concept art, because the school that he attended focused more on 3D production design. And so he really took a great initiative, and I actually had the privilege to even introduce him and bring him back to teach a course and do some running of a concept art club that we had. And so super humble in his approach, but my man worked really hard to get where he's at, and one of the nicest guys and best teachers that you will ever encounter. So I just wanted to add that to your intro. I thought it was a little bit humble. Sorry to cut you off, but go ahead and show your work and take it from there, my man.
No, I appreciate it. Um, so this is just kind of a run through of some of my work, some of which has been from personal work and personal development, kind of exploring different workflows, sometimes working in 3D, kind of mixing and matching between photo bashing as well as just using custom brushes or just brushes that I've found and kind of accumulated through the years. Um, so this is kind of if anything, a bit more of the kind of concept art focused section for any of you Dune lovers out there. This is kind of my take. Kind of feel like instances you when you're an artist at some point or another, you kind of find yourself working on the Dune property. I'm sure a lot of you have kind of come across some artwork, not just from artists who've done their own take, but after the movie came out, a lot of concept art dump on there. So a lot of these processes here, even down to the ideation stage, some of it's just, some simple nitty gritty paint scratch work. Some of it has a lot more kind of heavy duty 3D as well as kind of photobashy influence on there. This one in particular was kind of done as part of a class on Learn Squared by Jama Jurbayev in learning 3D code in terms of quickly ideating, say like cityscapes and things like that in 3D, and then kind of very easily transitioning over to Photoshop to then kind of give it all the bells and whistles to make it look pretty. Scrolling up here. So these are some stuff that I did for Game of Thrones for Fantasy Flight Games. Again, this stuff is actually pretty similar in terms of having either some 3D influence. So like, for example, this one had like a full 3D block in for the actual tower and the fort, and then kind of coming in with some photos to try to give it that nice crisp graphical fidelity. And then similar process here when it comes to this. Transitioning over to kind of something a little bit more painterly. I kind of every now and then want to try to have a bit of dabbling within stuff that's a little bit more photoreal. Things are a little bit more kind of like photo collage in terms of photo bashing. And then other times I kind of want to dive in and do things that are a bit more or majority kind of painterly. That's just mainly kind of using brushes and just sort of having some fun and just kind of doing art for art's sake. So it's like some of these images are for like my own personal project. Some of these things in here are going to be using some of the tools and kind of tricks and techniques that I've learned over the years that I use whenever I do any kind of like speed painting or like quick ideations or things like that. So some of this stuff is going to, I guess, sort of directly apply, and I'm going to show you kind of how to get to a point like this in terms of finish, and hopefully a pretty short, I guess, prompt time.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that we're looking forward to seeing your demo, this evening, and it's great that you're showing this work. I know that you work really relatively quick on some of these things, and that's why when it came to mind when we were looking for somebody to do the speed painting class, just some of the demos that you would do for concept art club, and it was limited amount of time where we'd have an hour and some change, and you'd be able to knock out something pretty high fidelity and at a nice level of finish within that time. And I think you're going to tap into all those tools. So we're looking forward to seeing that. And thank you for sharing this work.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. And again, guys, if you have individuals, if you have questions, just drop them in the chat. We will answer those as much as possible. I see my man Norman Lopez isn't here from Florida. What's up, Norman? Hope to see you soon. It's been a long time. Maybe you'll make it out to Lightbox again this year. I think we're going to have a presence out there, so great to see you. All right. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the class? Because this is going to be a class preview. I know that you sketched up an outline or to show the outline of what the class looks like.
I did, yeah. I'm popping it up right here on Photoshop.
Awesome.
Let me drag this over here. So now, can you? I'm assuming you guys can kind of see my screen. You can see my Photoshop up on there.
Absolutely. We see a 10-week breakdown for the 10-week class. Perfect.
Okay. So this is kind of a bit of a brief overview that I have set up on what I'm planning to do for the class. I want to start out initially, I guess, sort of from the basics where we're kind of working from the ground up in terms of organizing your workspace, your layout, your keyboard shortcuts in a manner that is kind of ergonomic for you when you're working. So that way, similar to, if you're painting or drawing traditionally, say like if you want to put your art pad as close as possible view-wise to a model or still life or whatever subject matter it is that you're painting. In the same way, kind of making the software work as easily as possible for you, so that way you're not kind of struggling in terms of finding hotkeys or drop-down menus or things like that. Just certain ways to kind of trim the fat and expedite the process so that way you can get your ideas out onto the digital canvas. And kind of moving forward from there, I want to delve into the idea of speed painting, and because it's a pretty broad, I guess, term in terms of how you can go about doing it. So kind of throughout the weeks, I'm going to be going into a lot of the different methods that I would use to say start a painting. So that can go anywhere from like with week 2, starting out with like using a photo template and kind of the do's and don'ts regarding that, or best practices or things better left not done. I do want to have some time to delve into kind of those fundamentals in terms of having really strong, compelling compositions. That's going to be kind of the bedrock when you get into these paintings. Because obviously, if you don't have a really strong foundation and then you're looking to kind of paint something, sometimes you can get completely overwhelmed, and then you're left thinking about value, color, design, composition, subject matter, story. Being able to have a good framework for all of those will kind of allow for your brain to just sort of go on autopilot, and then you can just kind of, I guess, regurgitate all those ideas out into the canvas and organize them in a really cool way. Then I want to talk about brushes and custom shapes in terms of how you can use those, both from creating your own unique shapes in Photoshop, as well as using actual photos and things like that to sort of create your own brush palette or brush presets, as well as with custom shapes, and basically show how you can ideate very quickly with those to get like a very loose painting and then kind of build up from there. Following that, we'll dive into different tools and adjustment layers. So a lot of like, I guess, more sort of obscure or nitty gritty tricks that are kind of used, where a lot of times you might see maybe certain artists who you really admire or revere, and you look at their images and you're like, how in the hell did they get their image to look like that? If it, if it looks so painterly, but also not, or it's super crisp, but then also looser in sort of some areas, or how does everything look blended where it's obviously wasn't the original photo? Basically little things like that. I want to kind of go over and show you all those little tricks and doodads that can kind of help to take your painting up to the next level, essentially.
I think doodads are very important. So a
It's
lot of
on the
doodads in there.
checklist.
All right, cool.
Absolutely. I want to delve into lighting in terms of ways that you can basically create different times of day, or if you're using natural light or artificial lighting, and trying to set it up in a manner where you can do things non-destructively, so that essentially you can have almost kind of like a bare bone framework, and then from there you can kind of extrapolate different lighting scenarios without always having to kind of go all the way back from scratch and develop your stuff from ground zero. I want to talk about the differences or challenges and pros and cons between doing paintings that are, I guess, character focused versus environment focused, things that are organic versus hard surface, and then kind of delve into some of the, I guess, tips or tricks that I use when kind of tackling those different subject matters. And then for the last two weeks, in terms of like material for weeks 8 and 9, I want to talk about using 3D, and even specifically using kind of machine learning or AI generated images, and kind of go over the pros and cons involving those. Because as a lot of a lot of artists have kind of shown work and showcased images that have been generated just via, AI or machine learning, and then kind of created their own images based off of that. So I thought that that could be an interesting subject matter to tackle, and then kind of talk about the pros and cons involving that. And then finally for the last week,
Oh, I'm
sorry,
so
go ahead.
sorry. I have a question in regards to that. So, Vic Soto asked, in regards to 3D, how much 3D knowledge do they have to have in order to take your class? So I know you're going to be using 3D, but is it just 3D base, real basic 3D, or do they have to have like a really in-depth understanding of 3D?
I wouldn't say that you'd have to have a huge in-depth. Primarily, for for that week, I'm probably going to be going over the use of Blender, as well as Quixel Bridge with the Epic Games library and the Quixel library that they have in there, which is free to use. If you're wanting to have a general understanding, if you've never touched Blender before, I would recommend that you head over to YouTube and just check out Blender Guru's introduction to Blender. It's a super quick series, and he's really informative in terms of how Blender works, and it's a really easy video to just get a basic framework, so that way you're just not kind of left with a bunch of question marks when you hop into the software if it's your first time.
Right, but I mean, respectfully speaking, they can actually come into the class and learn enough Blender within that week to base model light and move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to plug Jose Vega, one of our other instructors as well. He has a great YouTube series, Intro to Blender, as well. So those are free tutorials by him on YouTube. So if you haven't looked up Jose Vega's work as well, it's another good resource for you. There's tons of great resources out there just to get your hands wet with the software. So don't let 3D be a thing that's preventing you from moving forward with this class, because it's just a component of design that you'll be incorporating, and it's just another tool that you can use to speed up. But there's plenty of content within this class that does not revolve or wrap itself around 3D. There's many techniques that Logan's going to be covering.
Mm-hmm. It's simply just another facet and another tool that's used kind of in the grand scheme of it all.
Awesome. And then what about that week 10? I see a portfolio review and special guest.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have a buddy of mine come in to see if he can do a bit of a portfolio review, as well as kind of examine like your guys's final work for the class, and kind of give his own 2 cents. So I'll leave it as a surprise when it comes around. So
Awesome. Gabriel gave us another endorsement for Jose Vega. He said his tutorials are the best. They're geared towards concept artists, which, everything that we do at our school primarily is geared towards concept. Even our Blender classes are Blender for concept and 3D design for concept. So perfect. It all falls right in line with what we do. So any questions on the curriculum that you guys see there for the 10 weeks or so? I'm going to take the non-keyboard typing as no, so we can move forward.
dope.
Cool.
Okay, so let me see if this will auto update on here. Did it auto update to my blank file?
It did. I see a blank file.
Okay, cool. So I figured generally at this point, what I can do is I can kind of start to dive into a demo. And then if you're basically during that time, I can start to talk about like my process and kind of what I'm doing at the moment. If anyone's kind of having some questions regarding what I'm doing, if it's anything from general philosophies of art, or even specifically like what button sequence am I doing to achieve this effect, they're kind of all welcome from that point.
Right.
That
So
sounds
I'm
cool
gonna.
with you, Thomas.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm just going to put a side note on there, because this is about DC speed painting and kind of a class preview. If your questions can be pertaining to the subject matter at hand, that'd be great. We'll try to get to other things, off topic or outside of the general scope of the class. But if you do have questions, try to make it, current to either the class or the material that's being shared. There's a lot of times that questions will come in and about just general, getting a job in the industry, and that's not necessarily what this talk is about. We'll have plenty of talks about that in the future, but just to make sure that it kind of streamlines with the process, try to keep the questions relevant to the material at hand. That'd be awesome. Or Logan's background. Sweet.
Cool.
Cool. And we are going to break at some point in time, so we'll have a brief break. So if you guys want to stretch and get a drink, beverage, then we'll be able to do that midway through.
Okay. So give me a quick GIF while I go and migrate these images over to my file. So I wasn't completely sure exactly what it was that I wanted to demo tonight in terms of subject matter. So what I kind of did was I went into my my own reference database, and I just kind of pulled a bunch of random images, some things that I thought was kind of cool, and some things that was sparking a little bit of inspiration for something that I could possibly paint. So I'm kind of just going to be moving forward in a little bit stream of consciousness, and hopefully by the end of it have something cool to show from it. So you can kind of see from this, there's a lot of variety in terms of images that are focusing on specific subject matters, as well as from kind of more wider shots, and also including even some like specific sort of cut out PNGs of some higher quality things. These are all things that I'm going to be going over in the class, specifically in terms of their benefits, as well as some of their limitations. But basically, I kind of wanted to have a decent variety of either lighting, angles, and just subject matters, and then kind of see where my brain sort of goes from there. I tend to specialize in environments. So you can see from a lot of these images, they're more environment focused. So it's going to be kind of an environment painting tonight.
Real quick, too, just a little plug. We put your website in the chat so attendees can take a look at it. But you also do really amazing photo packs. So those are really, really great. They're reference packs, and I know artists love pulling packs for different textures or different references or use. And you have a nice little library of assembled, photos that you've taken. So I just wanted to big up you on that, because those are a really, really cool section on your website. So
I appreciate that. Yeah. Every now and then I kind of want to take the opportunity to go out traveling and check out some new places. And when I do, I kind of make sure to charge both batteries for my camera and make sure that my memory cards are completely clear. And then when I go there, I just kind of, I guess, spam the button and just kind of take photos of any and everything. And then afterwards kind of sift through and curate and then kind of set things up into their own individual photo packs.
And when you visit California, we still have to do that fishing trip where you photograph all the fish and their eyeballs and scales and things that we discussed. That would be really,
Yes,
really
we
cool.
do. I saw when you did. Yes, I saw when you did the recent late night fishing trip. I was jealous.
Oh, it's overnight, man. It's my newfound love is that overnight fishing. We do have a question that popped up in the chat. So Finley Downs asks, so do we typically figure out composition as you paint, or do you plan or visualize your painting in advance?
So that's something that I'll actually be going into more depth in the class, mainly because with speed painting, because of the fact that you have a lot of different methods when you start out your image, sometimes it can be an image that you sort of coalesce or create just by doing, say, line work, and then you kind of can use either painting or photos on top. But with the beauty of Photoshop, sometimes you can come in with photos and kind of in a Frankenstein manner, in like a, like grade school photo collaging manner, sort of start taking pieces and throw them together to kind of come up with something that might be cool or interesting, and then maybe cut out some things here or add some things there. So usually, because of speed painting and the manner in which it requires you to come up with an idea pretty quickly, it's sometimes a good idea to have a bit of a base in the background, because obviously this is a lot more daunting to deal with because you don't have a color or value range or anything like that to work with. But if you kind of just blow up the canvas with something like, say, a sky, which kind of works really well with backgrounds, that can kind of alleviate stress sometimes when you're not quite sure exactly what it is that you're wanting to paint or do. Sometimes it can give you some ideas, and then other times you can look at it and be like, nah, you know what, I'm not feeling this. But then it's no harm, no foul, because it was just a tiny image, or it was just one image to begin with. So the next thing that I kind of want to do here is I want to further solidify the composition and creating a ground plane. Doing this will kind of, in a sense, in my mind's eye, start to give me a sense of perspective and scale. I still am not quite sure whether or not I'm going to stick with this background. I may very well change it. I may even change up the color.
Now you're going to be going over in your actual 10-week class, these techniques, but also some painterly ones as well, correct?
Yes, I'll
Awesome.
be tackling all different manners. So it'll be, things that are just using custom brushes specifically. It'll be going over a method of photo bashing. Sometimes it'll even just be going over specifically using certain Photoshop functions to kind of get some free free photo bash material for nothing.
Sebastian has another question. Said he knows that you use the navigator panel. He thought it could be used as a thumbnail view, but why do you use it?
That's pretty much what I use it for. I tried to set up my right panel to kind of have all of my essential materials in here and consolidate the things that I don't regularly use. But this is, yeah, it's just mainly meant for me to be able to quickly scan and see that, oh, okay, my image is either working or it's not, and I need to make some adjustments. So it's a pretty straightforward thing of just basically having as a little thumbnail viewer, so that way I can see how things look at a smaller scale.
Your naming convention is pretty awesome for those photos. Pretty detailed.
These photos in particular, they aren't mine. These are a combination of photos that I've accumulated over the years. My primary resources are from photobash.org. I think they are now .co. I forget, they changed. Just look up photobash on Google and you'll find them, no problem. I also get a lot of reference packs from concept artist by the name of Gail, I believe is her name. I believe she's like a French concept artist who works in film. She's super rad and she takes really amazing photos in different locations. And so I'm kind of I guess a fan of hers where, anytime she comes out with a pack, I'm jumping at the bit.
Rachel has a question from the chat. Says, do people have to worry about copyright when painting like this? She's pretty new to this type of painting.
Yes, it's actually one of those things that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when you're creating images that are using photos. You're obviously dealing with the issues, like if you Google, a desert or any type of landscape, that image was taken by someone, and that person owns the copyright of those images. But there are certain artists or photographers who take the time to take photos of specific subject matter, whether they go to different locations or locales. They go and they just take a bunch of photos and then they set up their own reference packs where then they sell them to you for a price, but those images are royalty free. Or sometimes they'll have certain stipulations or restrictions where you can use them for, say, X amount of freelance projects, or you can use them unlimited when it comes to personal use. So things like for school and whatnot. So there's definitely a fine line. You know, you're not wanting to kind of hop on, say maybe like do like an image that's kind of based off like a really famous photograph or painting of someone or something, because then it's a very easy way of just kind of getting blacklisted or kind of outed as just someone who's just copying what already exists. Part of the finesse, especially with regard to photo bashing, it involves you taking what exists in the photos and collaging and sewing and stitching things in such a way that when you look at these, it's ultimately a new image altogether. And that's kind of the end goal. You want to be able to create images where someone might look at it and then they think to themselves, oh, I have no clue where one image ends and then the other begins.
Yeah, and I think you can do some research on, copyright law and use of that, because there's plenty of designers and graphic designers out there that use material, but I think it's on the scope of how it's changed and at what percentage can actually be recognized. So, I mean, the goal is, like Logan was saying, is to make it so it's implemented in a way and combined in such a manner that it's not clearly like that's my photograph. So. Awesome. And yes, Ria, we are planning on doing more open canvases that are class specific. We did one not too long ago with Stephanie Stein talking about our storyboard series. We'll do ones that are just guest artists. I'd like to get it going more frequently. It's just a matter of mustering up the time and energy. I'm getting old this day and age, but we will definitely try to bring more content. There was a question about your ABR files too, if you are willing to share brushes and ABR files. Is that class specific?
I think so. The only thing that I would say is that my brush files are complete are in complete shambles at the moment. I'm actually going in and reorganizing everything because over the years I've kind of accumulated so many, and so this is kind of my attempt right now of trying to organize them in some type of concise manner. So if I were to share these with all of you, I have no issue with it, but it's going to be one of those things where you're going to be lost in the weeds because there's probably over like 500, maybe over like 1,000 plus brushes in here.
To be honest with you, like there's so many places to accumulate brushes. I feel like brush accumulation is something that you should do and try to go to, there's a Tumblr site, I think digitalbrushes.com or Tumblr, and there's a bunch of digital brushes up there. Gumroad has a ton of them, and you can find just about every buddy's brushes out there. So like artists that you maybe admire their brush sets are out there. I have Logan's brush sets. Oh, that's weird, but I've had them from many, many years ago, and they were disheveled back then. So I could imagine, 5 years down the line, what they're like as he accumulates more. So it actually looks way organized now. So that's pretty good.
It looks serviceable from the outside, but then it's like the minute you open up the folders, you're kind of like, whoa, what happened?
Check out this chain brush. These are great questions in the chat, so keep them rolling.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to ask your question live, you can raise your hand, and we will try to allow you to do that. I see one hand raised. Kingston, I think you have a live question, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic. You are self-muted, so once I unmute you, you can ask your question. You are unmuted. Kingston, you have to unmute yourself. You're still self-muted.
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you now.
I think I raised my hand by accident.
Hello?
Oh, he raised his hand by accident, but now he is talking on the podcast. Awesome. Well, nice to meet you, Kingston. Welcome to the workshop. I'll unraise your hand. There you go. So no other accidental hand raises, but if you do have a question, use the hand raise feature, and we got you. So a thought in mind, are you just kind of filling this out? Do you have an idea of the story that you want to tell with this image?
Right
Big
now, I'm
picture, what
generally
is the
kind of
goal?
trying to feel it out. And some of it's a little bit of like the minute I add a photo in there, it's like, oh, that seems like it'll be a cool idea and kind of explore it. So right now, I'm kind of trying. I find a lot of these shapes really striking from this particular photo pack from Gale from it's called Strata Beach. These really almost artificial looking like straight lines and just kind of these striations of rock. Um, so I'm kind of just winging it with some of the photos that are uh, that I have in here in terms of letting a lot of the subject matter drive it and then kind of sort of let a narrative emerge from there. Um, right now it's pretty loosey-goosey and things are pretty sort of like raw at the moment. So I'm kind of wanting to get into um, some of the painterly aspect and start to kind of get rid of some of perhaps the clean photo elements in here, just so that way, whenever I'm adding in any extra, like say photoreal elements, or if I want to include any type of painterly stuff, it doesn't feel quite so disconnected when it's being included in there. So um, usually kind of at this stage too, things are pretty things feel relatively unintegrated. I'm not particularly worried at this moment in terms of, I'm not worried about lighting um, per se. It's something that I have in the back of my mind, but something that I'm not worried about drawing on the canvas itself.
Okay.
Mainly because kind of over time I've picked up kind of some practices where I can basically delve into this stuff near to the end, um, or just kind of have a lot of those lighting elements separate, and then I don't have to worry about so many things at once when I'm painting.
Perfect. And you answered a question from the chat without even seeing it because Patrick asked about that, in terms of how much do you think about lighting at this stage? So you just completely answered that. There is another question from Gardner Littleton. Gardner wants to know, is Clip Studio utilized often in the industry? He says its usage for manga and comics seem predominant, but Photoshop seems the biggest tool. What's your take?
Uh, I guess it's probably going to be just the stereotypical answer of you use kind of whatever tool best fits the situation. I've seen artists who have kind of either sworn off Photoshop because they were completely enamored by Procreate, and so now they basically just rock the iPad and the iPencil and Procreate, and they're, happy as a clam and are doing work professionally and, are never going back. And then you have other artists who, have been using Photoshop for years and basically are kind of like, you know what, uh, Photoshop kind of does good by me. I'm used to a lot of the tools and the practices that are involved in it. And so I'm just going to stick to what I know, which there's no fault in that whatsoever. It's basically whatever is kind of most comfortable with for you and works best for you. Because at the end of the day, when you're on a job and you're with clients and they want to have, they want you to meet a certain deadline, it doesn't matter what tool you use to kind of get to that point. All that really matters to them is, hey, here's the here's the deadline and here's the work that I did.
Can you talk about two things that I'm seeing you do? I see you use clipping mask quite a bit, and then this match color tool. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, this was a tool that I actually learned maybe like 6 or 7 years into using Photoshop. I learned it from the artist Maciej Kuciara, where when he used this, it was pretty mind-blowing. And so, especially when using photos, I tend to use it pretty liberally because it's a really fantastic way of trying to get a brief estimation of getting certain photos to match color and value of other photos in your scene. So I kind of wanted to grab this particular background in here, and I wanted to try to get it to match either the layer that's in here in the foreground or kind of have it try to integrate with the background due to the atmospheric perspective. So all that's basically involved with it. is you just have to choose your source file, which is the untitled 2, and then it kind of gives you a brief or sometimes long list of all of the layers that are in your scene. And then you basically just have to find which layer you're wanting it to sample from. So for me, I'm looking for Dramatic Skies 5 here. And so you see that there now it immediately changed it based upon the value range and color range that's in the source photo. And then from here with all these different gauges, you can come in and start to manipulate like the luminance, so kind of the value in here. You can even go as crazy as like messing with the actual color intensity, because it still carries some influence from the original photo. So like if I crank it up, you can kind of see it has some of those deep reds or even some of the violets in there, which I don't want. So I'm just going to kill that. And then lastly here with fade, that basically says how much or how little you want the sample layer to influence your layer that you're manipulating in here. So it's just a quick way of getting, sometimes you can get it right on the nose and it's fantastic, and other times it can be a little bit more finicky until you get it kind of close, and you just make some further adjustments afterward in with adjustment layers or in Photoshop directly. Sometimes you can be really, really specific with it. It's kind of the cool thing about match color is, say, for example, perhaps some of the lighter values in here were kind of bugging in terms of getting an accurate depiction of value in here that I'm looking for. And I'm mainly just kind of looking for some of the midtones or maybe the darker values. So what I can do is I can just grab a piece from the actual painting. So now I have just that piece that I lassoed and I cut and pasted. So I can actually come back in here, go to image and do match color again. And so now if I go back in, instead of choosing that Dramatic Skies 5 that we had before, grab that sample layer that I cut and pasted, dragging down the lumens. So now I'm getting a bit more accurate value range when I'm kind of going down into those darks, because now I don't have those lighter values and those lighter colors and hues to influence these rocks back here in the background. I kind of want them to be in shadow at this point, because it's in the background, it's not really that big of a deal or the main focus. I'm kind of wanting this to feel a little bit integrated before then moving into the foreground. Perfect. So this is kind of something that I can go back and forth from. I can do it if I'm wanting to mess around at all with the foreground or in the background, and then kind of bring up the painting slowly, I guess. Well, slowly, relatively speaking, for speed painting, I guess.
There is another question that came from the chat, Logan, and Mike asks, it says, it looks like you have a perspective tool in this toolbar on the right. Would you be able to share the name of that perspective tool?
I will. I don't even know if I remember it. Perspective Tools 2.
That's the name of it.
I know it's on a Gumroad page. It sucks as I'm blanking on the individual's name, because he actually comes up with a lot of rad perspective, or not just perspective tools, but just tools in general that are used in Photoshop. But Eitan Zana had a tutorial where he kind of showcased the tool, and it's one of those things where it makes it pretty stupid easy in terms of setting up a perspective grid in a pretty painless way, so that way you're not like using the line tool and replicating it, or using certain brushes and then skewing things down here and there.
Was it the same individual that did the it was like a quick launch, you could dock tools at the bottom?
You might be thinking about Jonas Dero.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Jonas Dero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know he has a perspective tool, or at least it was part of a pack that I saw at one point in time, but no, not him.
Yeah, I know it wasn't the same artist, but I'm not sure whether or not he used a similar tool or not.
And Gabriel said it may be Sergey Krisky. Sergey Sergey.
It's possible.
Okay, there's a link.
I feel really
in the
bad
chat.
because I don't remember the man's name for the life of me.
We can recopy that, Gumroad, and post it in the group chat, and everybody can take a look, because I know Sir Sergey has tools as well. I know Rudell was telling me that as we were trying to figure out who that was. So not a bad place to look. And again, it's all about having many tools in your toolbox. So there's another question that came from the chat. It says, with this method of developing an image, it's geared mainly towards products with more realistic design. And is it also being used for stylized work as well? And that's from Makoto.
Yes, so it's for this demo in particular, it's definitely showcasing more of the facets of working in photos and kind of photo bashing and mixing and matching between using certain brushes and kind of letting the graphical fidelity of the photos kind of show through. But a lot of these principles can still translate over to doing things that are a bit more painterly. So that would be involving things like making some more custom brushes or even custom shapes that'll allow you to ideate pretty quickly and kind of have a bit of a unified visual language when kind of going forward. Actually, I'm going to leave you there. So what I want to do is right now, I'm kind of feeling generally that I want to suss out sort of this area. There's some stuff in here that I'm kind of digging and I'm kind of liking, but this here right now, it's a little bit too blatantly some repeated shapes and whatnot. So I'm kind of just going to come in and just slap on another photo on here.
So Rebecca wants to know, when you're working on the process of working on a piece for a game, movie, or project, what are the top 3 things that you keep in mind to make the pipeline smoother?
That's a great question. I would probably say, ironically, one of those things actually has nothing to do at all with painting. Probably a big one. There's top 3 in no particular order. One of which is communication. So for example, like let's say hypothetically that you're tasked with doing, say like a game asset that needs to be like let's say animated. And you're like, okay, cool, I want to dive into it. Like you're really excited and jazzed about it. So then you just kind of, you go and you just start concepting like some images out. And then it kind of goes in for review or examination from like maybe your art director. Or even say like an animator, perhaps the animator who's going to be animating said object. And then all of a sudden you see, oh, this animator now brings up like, oh, there's a lot of issues with the design where it's going to be really difficult to animate things. And so you need to make certain adjustments here or there. This stuff isn't working. It's part of the collaborative process, but you could have very easily avoided that by going to the animator specifically and then asking certain questions in terms of what limitations they might have when working on this particular asset, if there are certain things that you need to keep in mind when designing things. So communication is probably a huge one that I think a lot of people can sometimes tend to overlook. And it's one of those things that goes a very long way when kind of all your ducks are in a row and you're communicating really effectively with your team, and then everything just goes smoothly. I think for yourself, probably another huge thing would be to have enough time for you to be able to look up and find enough references for you to work with. I'm sometimes even guilty of this, where I perhaps get really excited about working on a particular image or a design or something, and I just might want to dive right into it. when really I should be taking the time to actually gather up my references, and kind of taking things a little bit more slowly. Because again, it's kind of like making sure that your foundation and all your fundamentals are set up before even diving into, I guess, the cool or the fun stuff. Does what was it? Some of my old instructors used to say, it's like, you know, if you have a turd of an idea and then you polish the crap out of it, pun intended, I guess. At the end of the day, it's still just a polished turd. So you want to make sure that you have a strong foundation and understanding of like your subject matter and your material that you're diving into, because then that stuff shows through in your final product. And then lastly, I think probably a big one, especially in a team setting or working at games or with design, is having a good soundboard to be able to check not just check your ego, but then also sort of check your progress on whatever it is that you're working on. Sometimes you might be working in your own echo chamber, which is very common in art. Art making is itself a solitary act. And so sometimes we might be like, yeah, this design is looking really rad, or this is looking so cool. And then all of a sudden you show it to other people and then they're like, this composition's wrong, or I don't know if this is really working the way that your camera angle is set up and all that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, why didn't I talk to you guys sooner? So then you would have shown me like all of the things that I could have corrected and then ultimately kind of made a better image altogether. So I'd say those would probably be my top three.
Those are good answers. Michael wants to know Michelle wants to know, how often do you work on studies?
Almost daily, I would say. Art making is probably, it's akin to doing like training, like with athleticism, there's just less physical activity that's involved in it. This happens sometimes even with me. I might have certain instances where I might not have like painted a certain subject matter for a while. And then there might be times where, oh, let me, dive in and say like draw a person or a human or what have you, or a face. And then the face will just look terrible. And all I can think to myself is, I swear I've done this before. I know what a face looks like. I know where all the proportions are, where the nose is, where the eye socket goes, and all of that stuff. But it's just one of those things where over time, if that skill isn't kind of regularly, I guess, honed or sharpened, then it's just naturally going to atrophy over time, And so it's one of those things that you have to, I guess, stay vigilant on in terms of wanting to keep the skill up. Where are you, Lasso? Okay. All right. So generally right now, kind of my composition is starting to kind of lead itself, sort of like this really strong pull that's kind of taking me over to the left side of the composition. But I think it's cool. It's making for some really dynamic looking shapes. I'm starting to have some elements in here where there's kind of, I don't know, a bit of alien or fantasy-esque aspect to it. But there comes with it a huge potential pitfall where if I'm not careful, this giant shape essentially just acts as a big giant arrow that then leads the eye off the page. So that's something that I have to keep in mind, that I need to address And there are a lot of different ways that I can kind of go about fixing this, or just revising the composition in a manner where it's I'm then starting to dictate where I want the viewer's eye to go. You know what? I'm actually going to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm liking some of the photorealistic elements of this plant right now, but the thing is that I'm wanting to disperse it a little bit more liberally in other places, but I don't want to go through the laborious process of copying it, scaling it, and setting it up. So what I want to do is I just want to select it, and I want to define brush preset. I'll just call it plant. So now I have the brush in here. So if I just press on it, it's essentially that plant, and it reads, it takes all of the values and colors and gives sort of like a brief approximation of what the image would look like in brush form. So I still have some of that nice fidelity from the photo itself, but if I come in here and go to my brush settings, and if I start messing with the tapering, if I come in here and mess with the scattering, I actually want to increase the spacing on here. And I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I want to adjust the angle jitter ever so slightly, so that way it's not completely uniform. So now I can start to come in here. Let me actually organize these underneath here, so that way they're not popping out in front of the plants that I've already painted. So maybe perhaps these plants are kind of growing into the pits, that maybe perhaps these are little saplings, and then these big guys here are kind of what it grows into. Grab you.
There was a question that was a little bit off topic, but we're going to just circle back around to it.
Sure.
And feel like we can answer it anyways. It says, do you recommend having black and white studies and process examples, or more finished work in your portfolio, or as well as finished work in your portfolio? So would you recommend having those black and white studies or in a portfolio?
I think it depends upon, I guess, the specific matter or subject matter, with by what you mean as sort of like a study. For example, if you were to have like a section where you have that's labeled, say, studies, and perhaps it has like studies that you've done over say like maybe an extended period of time, so stuff that you do as sort of like a daily practice, and then you kind of curate out the images and compositions that work really, really well. I feel like there might be a certain place for it. But say if you have an image, or I guess value studies that are all using say images of artists that are kind of working in the industry, and they're all like studies of artists, like maybe there are artists who who you appreciate, who you're like, they perhaps like inspired you to want to get into like uh, concept art to begin with. It's fine to do kind of on your own, but then sort of showcasing it as a portfolio piece, uh, I guess it's a little bit more iffy. I would say if anything, they're probably more effectively used in tandem with another project. So like if you're doing something that like involves like a bit of a that has like a design process where there are some finished images or finished design sheets and works, but then you have accompanying value images that are kind of reinforcing the amount of time that you spent in it, then I feel like that context reinforces the use of the value of like the black and white images. But kind of as a standalone, I think that it varies and it depends.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So I'm wanting to warm up the background image here a little bit more. But I just want to do it specifically within the lights, and I want to leave, at least relatively speaking, I want to leave the darks relatively untouched. Okay. Okay, so you're in there with them.
I think this was advertised as a 2-hour presentation, Logan. So
Okay.
we're getting to about the halfway point. So let me know when you want to take a break. You can take a 5-minute break and then come back to it.
Oh, sure. We can actually take a little break right now. Quick little 5-minute.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here at 8:10. And in the meanwhile, Amrit, our admin extraordinaire, is going to show a slideshow of former student work from the digital speed painting class. So this is actually student work that's going to be on a presentation to you. And we will see you guys back here in 5 minutes. Take it away, Amrit. I didn't mean to cough so loud with my mic on. Sorry, y'all. This is hilarious. They are, Amber, you're gonna have to turn on your camera and do some bench pressing because they want to know how much can you bench. They want to know how big you are. Michi and Kingston, and also now Sheriff wants to know what's a big am. So we're gonna have to explain what a big am is. Big am is my number one dude, one of our main admins here at the school. He's been with me at Brainstorm Inland since day one, so he was original. And Riddell's in here too, so if you guys know Riddell, he's behind the scenes answering questions. I'm back on camera. I don't know why. We probably should be back as well, but I jumped the gun. Let's see. Riddell, you got to be careful, man. He could bench you, dude. So just be careful. You guys want to turn on your cameras really quick and say hello, Riddell and Amrit? I love it, dude. I think you should. No, I totally think you should. Uh-oh. Vegas talking gym stuff. So yeah, now we're getting into a fitness workshop. So yeah. All right, Amber, you're gonna have to flex, dude. Turn on your camera, bro. Sun's out, guns out, dude. Gotta show him, dude. And Riddell, show him what you're working with, dude. They refused to go on camera. Riddell said he's barely wearing any clothes, so he doesn't want to show him and turn on his camera. And Amber said his hair is not combed, so that's not happening right now. That's funny. And Elgin wants us to keep it PG-13. This is what happens when we go 2 minutes over break. And yeah. So Logan will be back shortly. No. Oh no, we'll leave this on the recording. This is a part of it, so I'm not gonna front and say this isn't who we are, because this is pretty much what it is 24/7. We don't need to edit this out. This is, this is Amrit. And yeah. I don't know if I should call Logan. It's late where he's at.
I'm here, I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Turn on your camera, dude. You'll be leaving me here. There you go. Awesome. All right, so they want Brainstorm after hours next week, and Amber left him thirsty, so you're gonna have to flex, Logan. So just a little arm flex, please. Show him the guns. Oh, there you go. Whoa, damn.
Wow.
Right. Let's go back to powerlifting.
That art life. Okay.
We have to make you the presenter again. Give me 1 second, and you are ready to rock.
All right.
All right, so let's get the chat back to questions for Logan and about speed painting and art in general. Amber will be available all Discord. You can go to his Discord and his other services for that stuff.
Is it Discord?
Oh yeah, he's got his own channel that he won't even invite me to. So I don't know if I want to go. I don't even know if I want to be there.
I'm proud of him.
Oh yeah,
that's sticking to his guns.
No pun intended.
Oh, I totally intended it.
Okay, cool.
All right. So kind of at this point, I have enough of a base that I can kind of start to get a lot more, what's the word? I'm going to try to go like a little bit more quick and dirty to kind of start to get a more unified picture overall with everything. So even though this is destructive, and sometimes it's just one of those things where it just is what it is, and you kind of just got to get done what you need to get done. So what I'm wanting to do here is essentially just kind of come in and lasso in all of the things that are in my foreground. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just kind of create a layer that collapses everything. So that way I just have a clean foreground layer that I can just use instead of kind of sifting through a lot of the layers that I've accumulated. And then I'm going to go and do this for all of my images. So it's just a quick little key function of Control-Shift-C, then Control-Shift-V to basically paste everything in place. If I just isolate out this layer, so you can see that now all that stuff that originally was on like its own separate layers is now collapsed all into one thing. What I'm going to do also is, just for cleanliness sake, so that way I'm not kind of going between a bunch of layers and scrolling up and down from the layer menu or tab. I'm just going to group all of these into their own group. All right, now I'm going to use one particular method that's a favorite amongst concept artists, and one that probably a lot of you have seen, where there is the fabled mist to create atmosphere and to totally not give the illusion of detail where there is none. It's just one of those quick, easy, I guess you could say, sort of concept art hack that's used a lot of the times because it's just a really easy way of kind of taking something that is otherwise like not atmospheric or moody, and then just kind of giving that quick initial punch where now all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's something, you know, mysterious going on in this location now. The thing that I'm trying to keep in mind though is that, you know, I'm still dealing with the, I guess the initial problem that I spoke about earlier regarding like my composition. So I'm going to want to just try to tackle that and get out of the way immediately. So because of the fact that I have that really strong pull over to the left, the quick and dirty solution is to essentially just kind of grab something that's in the environment, sort of copy and paste it. If I'm not wanting to make it look like a strict copy of this, I might sort of adjust the angle of this. I might actually even scale it down, copy another piece, move it, warp that around a bit. I'll actually place it underneath. So I'll carve into the shape, kind of maybe go for something that's a little bit more maybe striking. I'll create a clipping mask, because then what I want to do is, right now the lighting for it's pretty diffuse. So I'm just going to come in with a bit of a dirty brush and a lighten layer and just kind of paint in my lights. And because of the fact that it's a dirty brush, it's at least sort of giving me the illusion that it is, that's as if I'm painting on the actual like texture of the rock itself. I'm actually going to really quick switch over to now. Screen actually might be okay too. And then I'm actually just going to heat that value up a bit. It's closer in the foreground, and so it's going to be more saturated the closer you are to the camera.
The mist hack, because Sebastian missed it, it was just pretty much a brush, a cloud brush that you painted in, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to
Nothing
knock back
to
some
it,
details.
nothing crazy. I can even, for the sake of example, so like there is a lot of nice little detail, let's say, that's here, but there's a lot of value range, and so this is providing a lot of competition for, say, like my main focal point. So let's actually select this, get that little piece in there. Oh, there you go. Again, Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V. And I just come in here with a new layer that's between the new layer that I just made and then the sort of collapsed foreground layer that I had before. I'll just darken this up
come in here with a mask and just ease off on kind of that really, really sharp, darker value that isn't present over here. And I can adjust that later, but right now I kind of want to get rid of the fact that it's really, really in your face. And so you can just kind of come in with a bit of a cloudy brush or atmospheric brush. And then just start to paint in wherever you're wanting some atmosphere. Okay. I would like another ground texture. And I will use, I'm actually going to use you. So I'm going to try, if anything, a couple methods of maybe what I might want to do with this. So the first thing that I want to do is I just want to kind of crunch in the values. Get like some really, really dark darks and some really, really light lights. I'm going to rasterize this. So I'm going to come in with my, actually go in with my magic wand. I have contiguous off. And so then when I select a dark value, it's going to select all of the relative same values that are in the image. I'm actually going to come in here and select like the next darkest just to get a little bit more pixel information in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste it. And so now I kind of have that information on there. I'm actually going to come in, grab you. There we go. It's better. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the free transform tools and then kind of use it to give a bit of perspective on here, a quick little ground plane. Because I noticed that because of the fact that there aren't too many shape comparisons within like the foreground and the background, the sense of scale and space is getting a little bit lost. So I'm just going to come in here and just give a little bit of information there. And because of the fact that it's something that is, it's a fairly random shape, so I can come in here and start to repeat it in other areas. I'm going to adjust to see multiply looks. We'll use darken. The next thing that I want to do is I want to go into my layer properties. So I'm going to double click this layer. There you are. Okay. So it has my blend mode on here, but what I want to do in here is come down to these little gauges, I guess. So these value ranges affect how the layer that you're wanting to manipulate, as well as the layers that are underneath it, interact with each other. So if I come in with the light values of this particular layer and I start to bring them down, you'll notice that it starts to fade off, going from its lightest values to its darkest values, and it tries to integrate it in somewhat of a believable manner, a realistic manner, to the image that is underneath it. And then when it comes to the underlying layer, it's basically saying you're essentially giving a range where you're allotting the top layer to integrate in. So you see that I'm taking the highest value and I'm bringing it down. And so you're noticing that for the brighter values, that layer isn't showing up at all. But in the darker layers, in this underlying layer range that I have set up, it is showing through. So it's kind of one of those little things that you have to finagle a little bit to try to get something that feels closer believable. And it's a nice little way of kind of taking bits and pieces and kind of trying to get them to seamlessly integrate with each other. It's a nice little finesse tool that that when you get the hang of it, depending upon what your subject matter is and what layers you're kind of working with, you can get some really, really cool results. There'll definitely be some examples that I'll be sharing in the class that work really well for things like lighting, texture, and whatnot. Top layer, yes, it is. Okay. Okay. So at this point now, I'm wanting now to integrate in those plants. And to say like that desert floor or the sand floor. So I'm kind of just going to come in. And right now at this point, just start to generally give a bit of a once over to everything. So like if there are certain discrepancies of like photos that aren't completely integrated, or if there might be certain pieces that could say use a little bit more, like maybe some rocks or just value shifts or things like that. Like kind of at this point, I'm now wanting to sort of come in, say get rid of things that perhaps aren't working, or add things where they're needed. And so this is kind of the point where with all of these pieces in here, I'm now kind of starting to go in just with brushes and then just painting directly on top of the layers that I have. And now I'm kind of wanting the brushes themselves to do more of the heavy lifting. So now I have like, relatively speaking, like all the elements that I'm wanting to use in here. And now this is like, I guess, the point where I can let my my more designer brain take over. So like before, I was more just kind of focused on trying to find an idea, putting elements and shapes in there and seeing stuff that maybe did work or stuff that didn't work. And then now that there's a bit more of a clearer picture, now I can be like, okay, let me now sort of like maybe carve into this shape or maybe lose some detail here if I want to, because honestly, this stuff is not the most important. So we'll just lose some of that information because that's okay. Okay. So I'm going to come in here also and actually, I want to grab this plant one more time. Because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, I want to have some type of link between the, I might have collapsed it. That's okay. I want to have some link between these plants elements that are up here and then kind of these organic, sort of like prehistoric looking plants over here in the foreground. I'm going to do a trial real quick, and I don't want to screw up the image that I just cut out. So I just made a quick copy. just replicated it and did some warpage. So I'm going to make a mask because I want to use this again. And so I don't want to get rid of all of that initial work that I did and just kind of destructively screw up this kind of selection in this layer that I have. So I'm going to make another one. So go warp again, so that way we can get that. There we go. Coming with the layer mask. Fix that. Okay. So now I want to just apply the mask at this point. So one thing that you probably notice is that the lighting on, say, like the tree that I initially set up isn't consistent with some of these pieces on here. So what I want to do is I want to copy these out, and I want to create a curves adjustment. And then what I want to do is crank up the values and kind of more or less create a sort of a lighting layer, if you will.
Good question from the chat. And it says, I understand complexity can suck up time, but you recommend a time limit or timer to try and accomplish certain tasks or studies? And that's from Sebastian.
Yeah, that stuff definitely helps. I think sometimes it depends upon what your goals are with your image. If you have a decent idea, then I guess things are going to go a lot more smoothly, as opposed to if you're just sort of if you're just kind of going willy-nilly. The thing about it as well is that if you also have a goal set up, it kind of, or a deadline, I guess, that also tends to hone your focus in, because then you have to then kind of tap into your time management skills. And then you're thinking, oh, okay, I don't have a whole lot of time to say focus on the design of a particular object, or these rocks that I'm rendering out like off the side of the canvas aren't really that important. You know what? This looks better without the trees, so I'm getting rid of the trees.
And then Michi wants to know, what do you consider when implementing story into an environment?
It's a really good question, because a lot of the times that's can definitely be the crux. It can be the thing that makes or breaks environments sometimes. Probably a big aspect of game development in particular does this in a really effective manner. I'm not sure if any of you have caught the Elden Ring itch since it's been out, but I think that's one of those. It's a game in particular. A lot of other games use it, but it's the only one that comes to mind for me because it's been a game that I've been addicted to for a while. It's a game that comes to mind for me as one that uses storytelling in its environments without having any type of strict exposition or what have you. So let me give you an example. Say if you decide to do a painting of I don't know, a castle or like a fort, some questions immediately will then come to mind when you use that particular subject matter. Is this a fort that is being constructed? Is it something that is being assaulted? Is it ransacked? And now there's nothing but like fire and rubble and bodies kind of left in the wake. Is it a fort that was overtaken and now there's, say, a new faction that rules it? There's a lot of different avenues that you can take on just one thing, and so that's something that you have to think about when you're creating environments, because comparing them to characters, let's say, you can argue you can make an argument for it being, I guess, quote unquote, easier to have storytelling with like character designs and stuff like that, because it's isolated to like a single like person. It's like you throw, I guess stereotypically like a scar on their eye, or they have like, I don't know, a kid or a dog with them, that kind of naturally gives a certain element of storytelling that's also very relatable to the audience. So a lot of the times people tend to kind of gravitate to those type of things more sometimes with environments. However, when you come across an artist who's able to really, really tap into a lot of those symbols or storytelling methods that have just been used time and time again, and they're presented in a very fresh or compelling manner, that can make people just completely enamored with an environment. And in certain cases, like the argument can be made that for some of them, they can be sometimes even more compelling than characters.
So yeah, that definitely answered the question. Thank you. What level are you on Elden Ring right now?
I beat the game and I'm playing it again.
Oh, thank you. I want to shut you down right now. Shut you down.
It's so good.
It's fun, but it feels like chores. I feel like I'm doing work, and it's fun. I'm having fun with it. I hated it at first, but now I enjoy it immensely. But when I get in there, I feel like I have to really dedicate some time to it. Like I can't just casually play it for 5 minutes. You get nowhere. You die 10 times in 5 minutes, so you have to really try your hardest. But
I won't lie, there was a learning curve. There was a learning curve for me, like with any Souls game that anyone kind of gets into. And then there was even a certain time to where I remember I even judged it prematurely, where I noticed that they were just reusing a lot of assets from previous games. They were reusing certain animation cycles, and at first I was just like, they're using the same animation sequence. They've got like the same gestures. I'm seeing this exact same enemy that was copied and pasted, and so I was kind of like, what's happening? And then after about like 10 hours or so, then it clicked, and just it was mainly the scope of the world that then I got really, really lost in, because there were certain times where I'm just kind of like, I'm wandering around and I'm like, oh, it's in here, and then I go and investigate, and then it's like a cave, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm like knee deep in some place that I had no clue how I got there, but I was just I was just there for the journey.
yeah, no, same. And I actually tried to take it back, and they wouldn't take it back from me on Steam. They're like, nope, you played it too much. And it was the first game ever I tried to return. And I'm glad I did it, because then I just like, screw it, now I own it. So I gotta tough it out a little bit, and and now I'm making my way through it. So it's a lot of fun.
Don't worry, man. We'll co-op.
I don't want to co-op though.
one day.
I kind of want to do it all on my own. I don't want to co-op. But I don't know. Kind of
That's
a butt
fine.
'Cause I've
I
had
didn't
other
want to.
people offer, and I'm like, dude, I just want to try and see how far I can get on my own.
That's cool. I didn't want to co-op anyway.
Cool. You live in a different time zone, bro. Like, I'm not gonna, yeah, wake up at 5 in the morning to co-op with you.
Okay.
That actually hurt my feelings a little bit there, buddy.
You know it's not true.
Did you defeat Millennia Blade of Mikella?
Yep.
That's right. Oh, yeah, he did, with his eyes closed and his left hand off the
No.
controller.
God, I wish.
No spoilers, though.
I wish. No, absolutely not. For a Souls game, the authenticity of the first experience I would never want to ruin for anyone. It's too good.
This is where you got to grind it out. You got about 20 minutes to rock this speed painting.
Okay. All right. So I have all of my pieces in here. Some of the stuff is looking okay. Some of the stuff is not completely integrated, but that's okay. None of the stuff is, or some of the stuff that's not feeling completely integrated isn't necessarily super important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm kind of going to take some more of the big steps or the big strokes to start to try to integrate everything in. So I'm just going to collapse this stuff down so that way I have more ease of my layers in here. And so then I'm just going to create a separate group for lighting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layer blending mode to color dodge. I'm going to fill it in with black. And that's not completely black because you saw a little bit of a value shift. So I'm just going to take it all the way down to black. So nothing happens here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select kind of the lighter value of the clouds. I'm going to come in here with a soft brush. And then what I'm going to do is kind of start to come in and literally paint in my lights. Now this is something that requires a little bit more finesse because like color dodge is, if I just come in here and then just go full blast, you can see that it just goes atomic, which I don't want. And so I want to gradually just sort of build these up. And so I basically have kind of my light on a layer that I can come paint in and out as I choose.
Celia Raymond wants to know why you put a black mask down on that clipping layer, where you put black down.
For this color dodge layer?
Correct.
So if I go on a new layer and I do color dodge, and then I paint, like actually let's paint in the same area that I did before. You'll notice that actually it seems so incredibly like more blown out, and I'm also getting like some whites, and then I'm getting like this really, really crazy yellow. Color dodge actually works with a full value range. So if I have nothing filled in on a color dodge layer and then I'm trying to paint it, I'm essentially working with a more limited value range than I would if I filled everything in with black from the beginning. So it just gives me a full from 0 to 100 value range, as opposed to probably from like a 50% gray to the 100% white. So it gives a fuller sense of color and value.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to come in with a multiply layer. I don't want to use black specifically. I'm actually going to use probably this relative like value here with the mist. And I'm going to use that to kind of punch down some of these values here in the foreground and kind of start to isolate and bring the focus up here. Kind of use these as a bit of a supporting element for some of these kind of bigger pieces that are up here. Another thing that I want to do, which I don't have a photo for it, and this is kind of, if anything, this is a sort of spontaneous idea that's either going to be cool or it's going to suck, but I'm just going to kind of try to paint it in briefly. Maybe kind of like you see like these big old roots, or something that further integrates the like this big old plant, so that just doesn't strictly look like, oh hey, it's just smashed into the side of this like rock formation. That maybe there I can give some kind of again, this is kind of the element of storytelling. It can be something that isn't necessarily what's the word, convoluted, or that's sort of like a multi-step thing. For example, it can be something that is just very simple, like there are these plants, they're growing on these rocks. How are they growing into the rocks? Well, they got some roots. And then there's your story. Then the cool thing is you can start to get questions in terms of, you know, what kind of plants are these? Why do they grow in this particular area? Those aren't questions that necessarily need to be answered, but those are questions that possibly, as a viewer, the audience would look at and start to think about. And it provides more intrigue and more interest in the painting. Okay, so I am liking that. So what I'm going to do is I want to try to create a little bit of bridging between, say, like those roots up there, and then perhaps some roots down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab a dark layer and essentially just kind of come in and start to paint some roots in there. So now I have a connecting element. I'm starting, no, that's too extreme. I'm trying to create like a part of the composition that complements, say, this new element that I've added. You want to be a little careful with it, because if this is something that's new to the composition, something that you didn't consider, say when doing like an initial sketch or something, or say if this is like for a client and this was something that they didn't necessarily think about, this isn't always advised to do. This is something that's probably more appropriate or safer to do like on your own for personal stuff. But if it's a potentially cool idea, it's like at the very least you'll want to create like a separate layer where you can show your client like, hey, here's the stuff that I did that was supposed to be like what you asked me for, but then also I had enough time to kind of come up with, you know, another idea, say with this added element in there. If you like it, cool, here it is. If not, like, no harm, no foul. This didn't take away from, say, my initial task. So I'm gonna come in, just sprout in, just get real aggressive with it, just kind of throw in some roots in the foreground. And kind of try to use the contrast of shape to really emphasize the shift in, or I guess the depth and the perspective that's going on in the painting. So if I have the larger shapes that are in the foreground that the viewer can look at and see, oh, okay, I have this kind of dark, like this cylindrical or like snake-like looking shape here in the foreground. I'm seeing that shape replicated over in the midground, and then smaller shapes in the background, and they're all kind of similar or replicating. Then you reinforce that depth and perspective. So just be a quick and loose, like bark texture. Get something a little bit dirtier. Let's get that entire foreground. Yep. Okay. And then just get a little bit of that local color from the roots up above. So that way we have that similar value and color relationship. And then what I can do too is maybe have, just get a smaller brush. Push an emphasis of scale by having like perhaps smaller roots that are jutting out from there. And now I kind of want to give real quick, brief, similar treatment. So that way these roots over in the midground aren't completely just one single value. All right. So usually some of these post production stuff is kind of left. This is usually done after the entire image is kind of more or less done. I usually kind of come down here to these adjustment layers. Probably the ones that I generally like to use a lot is color lookup for a couple of reasons. I'll kind of show here. So if I just kind of copy and paste and just kind of collapse the whole layer here, I'll kind of show a bit of an example. So you come in here to the 3D LUT file. I have no clue what that stands for, but if I kind of start to cycle through, you can see that it just gives a full-on adjustment of the colors and the values, and then it kind of creates a brief approximation of whatever that specific color or value range is supposed to be. So you can get some really huge, like extreme shifts in terms of color and value. So you can go really, really extreme and say shift temperatures like this. Or you can kind of see, like from what you saw earlier, you can kind of see something that maybe perhaps feels like a little bit more vibrant or saturated. So kind of just for this example, we'll go foggy night. And then I can come in here, I can mess with the opacity. Perhaps if I don't want it to necessarily be that extreme. And then if I want to, I can come in here with a layer mask. And then I can use and paint in, so like the initial base layer that I had, say if I want to come back in and like punch up some of those warms back in there. And so then this will kind of be a, what's the word, a compounding effect. So then like if I want to come in here with color balance and then I want to shift, if I want to shift my shadow specifically towards say maybe like more cyan. So now I'm just going to collapse these here. So now if I kind of go back and forth between the original, it's a very subtle thing, but it's one of those things that kind of takes your image or your final result and just kind of gives it a little bit of that, what's the word, a little bit of the chef's kiss. Just kind of take it to that extra step. And then if you're wanting to, if there's any little extra stuff that you either want to add or fix, then you can certainly do that stuff after.
Folks, if you have questions, this is a good time to ask. This is when the finishing touches on.
Yes, ask away.
There's a question about artists that are your inspiration or artists that you look up to. So do you have any artists that you draw inspiration from directly?
Probably one particular artist who's like whose coattails who I always try to chase just because of the fact that I find his design sense and I guess style or finish to be, I don't know, I jive with it. Is Jamie Jones. I had just for years, every single image that he would come out with, it would always be jaw dropping, and it was always kind of like, damn, this is a particular style or level of quality that I want to match or hopefully at some point exceed. Good luck on that, but I can't help but sometimes have the have lofty goals sometimes. Sometimes I find that you sweet. Sometimes that just compels me to sort of work a little bit harder if I'm kind of giving myself an impossible goal, because then I stubbornly like to think, well, screw you, I'm going to achieve it anyway.
Do it.
Another artist whose work I really admire, and I really wish that probably he and Jamie Jones would hopefully like release some kind of tutorial for like their work someday. Chase Stone is another artist. He's one of those people who I'm almost positive, like I've never seen like his process, but I'm almost positive he does have a healthy usage of like 2D and 3D work, but his level of finish and fidelity is always just mind blowing, and you really have kind of no clue where the 3D or the photo bashing ends and say like the actual painting itself begins.
So Kingston asked, from a student perspective, is it better to let your process grow organically or spend dedicated time improving it? I'm gonna say spend the dedicated time improving it, but also do it organically.
I guess I'm curious on what he means by process.
Can you elaborate a little bit, Kingston, or if you want to turn on your mic, we can do that. Since we know your mic works, let's do it.
Yeah, but just how like you approach making a composition, like research, painting, sketching. You think that comes with time, or you think you should focus on one part at a time, or just like plow through a bunch of paintings?
Okay, so I see. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
The way that I love to answer it is I'm going to steal it from Anthony Jones, because he gave this example, and it's one that I really like because it kind of tends to ground it in, I guess, a sort of average, an average viewer sense. Like there's no way that you can sort of misinterpret it. So he had brought up, essentially, he asked a general question to people where he was like, okay, I want to be healthier, or I want to like get in better shape. Like, what should I do? And generally speaking, everyone would say like, oh, you should like exercise or what have you. And it's like, okay, like, should I do like weights? Should I run? Like, what is it that I should be focusing on? You know? And then generally everyone was kind of giving different answers. And then he framed the question differently to where he was like, okay, well, what would you say if I asked, or if I said that I wanted to train for a marathon? The question itself then completely changes how you go about in the answer. And so I think for you, part of figuring out that answer and sort of what you might want to focus on with your process is maybe perhaps what are certain elements that you that you might not be particularly strong with. Like, what are your weaknesses? Is it composition? Is it anatomy? Is it your familiarity with like with a particular software or medium? And then if there's, you know, yes to any of those, and it's something that you want to fix, then that kind of creates a bit more of a focused approach in terms of what you want to tackle. And then kind of go from there, I think is probably sort of the best approach. So I would first focus on what exactly it is that you're trying to either refine or improve upon in the process, and then begin to ask yourself questions of how can I then improve upon those specific things. So I hope that answers the question.
He said that was very helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, we have time for about 2 more questions. So if you guys want to go ahead and drop them in the chat or raise your hand, I'd love to hear somebody else talk other than myself. That'd be great. I see Norris Lynn is up in here. Hi, Norris. What's up, Jose? A lot of familiar faces. Brainstorm camp. Very cool. All right, we have a question from Riley Mann. I'm going to unmute your mic, Riley, and then you need to do the same. You can ask your question.
I just wanted to ask, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Loud and clear.
Is this session recorded anywhere? So we can replay it?
Yes, it's being recorded on the web, and we should have it to our YouTube channel shortly thereafter.
What was your YouTube channel called, sorry?
Brainstormschool.com. Just look us up on YouTube, and we can actually link it in the chat for you too. So yeah, we're definitely going to do that. We'll upload it shortly. I'll probably edit the PG-13 stuff out of the middle. I don't know. I'm going to go back and forth on that one, but we'll come back to it.
All right, cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Great questions. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, another question from the chat. It says from Mike. He said, would you also work more on values and focus when taking this to a closer finish with the photo detail being visible everywhere now?
I'm sorry, can you say that question one more time?
Yes, so the question is, would you also work more on values versus focus when taking this to closer finish with the photo detail being visible everywhere now?
Yeah. So for example, if it's something that I'm wanting to take, I guess, a little bit more time on, or say if I'm taking a step back and I see like, oh, okay, maybe there is a lot of photo detail or like a lot of that high graphical like noise everywhere, and I want to have some way of kind of figuring out what that might look like. I'll just kind of come in with a hue saturation adjustment layer, and then I'll just throw everything down and then kind of see exactly where my values are being distributed. Sometimes I might leave this this on here, and then I even might come into say like my lighting layer, and then what I'll do is I'll just come in with my darken layer. And then I might try to punch down some areas. So essentially kind of start to bring in some areas of rest. But I want to be careful with this because I'm using just a straight black. And so if I'm not too careful, kind of when I get rid of it, sometimes it can cause some pretty stark contrast with it, because the way that darken works is since it burns the layer, sometimes it shifts the color temperature. So you kind of notice here that it shifts things to be a little bit warmer. And so then kind of from that point, I might decide to come in with like a hue saturation, and then even perhaps colorize it, and say if I'm working strictly within the cools. So I'll just do this for clarity's sake. Okay, there it is. And I'll just bring it a little bit more toward the cools from that point. And then I'll kind of go back and forth. Sorry, what was that, Tom?
No, I was just going to ask you, what about like areas of noise and texture versus, areas that are not meant to be noisy and textured? Do you start punching back some of those details other than just the value, controlling the value, or do you like to keep everything fully rendered out and textured?
Usually, generally, I like to keep it. Ooh, one thing that I do like to do. Sometimes it depends. I don't normally do this all the time. I'm really gonna keep my fingers crossed that I can showcase this. I haven't used it in a while, and it's like sometimes it takes forever. But I'm gonna use a filter of Acviz artwork. This is a particular Photoshop plugin that was shown to me in a class. Forgetting the artist's name. I know at least his last name was Swang. But this particular filter, I'm not sure if you can see it or not. Not sure. Another window's on top of your shared application. Please move this window. Oh, okay. So it probably isn't. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply it, and then hopefully it'll kind of show through once it's finished. If not, I can probably showcase it at a later date. But anyway, what the plugin does is it applies kind of like a painterly sort of like filter or wash over the entire image. And so what this does is it actually takes a lot of that high like frequency noise that's used in photos, and then it essentially kind of blurs a lot of that stuff out and tries to give the overall image this kind of consistent, cohesive look and aesthetic. And so then the idea would be to then kind of come in with a layer mask and then kind of take some pieces out or bring some pieces, keep some pieces in terms of detail or looseness. So it's kind of taking a while in here. So I'm thinking that probably for now, I'm just gonna cancel it.
There was a question that I wanted. I'm sorry. I know you're
Cool.
going to
So it did.
out.
So it did do something. So it didn't finish through with the entire process, but at the very least, you can kind of see here how now it got rid of a lot of the high frequency noise from the photos. It's not perfect, but it's something that within the plugin itself, you can then start to adjust the level of strokes with whether or not they have certain curvature and how little or a lot of the graphical fidelity that you want to keep. So then from that point, you can kind of come in with the layer mask. You can inverse your selection, and then you can start to come in here with a brush and then start to paint in, say perhaps like those painterly elements. And then the objective would be to try to have that nice mixture between something that's a bit more painterly and then something that's a little bit more photo real.
Mind blown. And you don't remember the name of the plugin?
The plugin is called, I believe it's called Acviz. It's labeled right here, Acviz, and the plugin is called Artwork.
That's bananas. I had a question that I wanted to address in the chat. And this is from Sebastian. We dropped a promo code, and the promo code entitles everybody to this workshop a 10% discount to your class. And the question was asked if they used the promo code, if they were still eligible for installment payments. Unfortunately, we can only use one code for the class, and installment payments is a promo code in itself. So if you wanted to do the promo code and installment payments, you would just email us, sign up for the installment payments, and then we'll generate a code for the 10% dollar amount that we can send to you that you can actually use on any class for future terms. So that's our workaround there, Sebastian, if you wanted to do payments and utilize the 10% code. Cool.
All right.
And that goes to anybody, not just Sebastian. And I know we said we were going to wrap, but I think I had told you we were going until 10 anyway, so I don't care if we stay on a little bit longer. Elisa asks, and this is a question in the chat, do you usually prepare a lot of examples when the brief is not really clear about what they're asking for, or do you try to pair of ideas and just go on? So do you just try limited, or do you do a lot of examples when the brief is not really clear from a client?
So what would you mean by examples? Are you talking in terms of like sketch iterations?
I would imagine so, but if you want to unmute your mic, Elisa, we can have you elaborate. Or not. So your mic is live if you want to, just close in a little bit more on your question. You just have to unmute it yourself. You're live. Oh, I'm gone. We'll get some clarification on that. We'll come back to it.
Sure.
I imagine she's talking about iterations, though. I mean, that would make the most sense in context of the question.
Okay. I would say probably then, I think the most important thing is trying to get clarification and asking like sort of the right questions to your client or to your art director to get like the best possible, I guess, advantage moving forward with whatever it is that you're tasked with doing. So if you're tasked with designing a certain character, it would be really important of knowing kind of perhaps like what your sandbox is that you're going to be playing in, and even like if there's a sandbox period at all, because it's one thing to, I guess, be like, oh, okay, I'm the concept artist, and they want me to, why is that green? And they want me to like design a character, so I'm going to give them, it's like 50 concepts and ideas, and it's all going to be like exploring different like styles and all this stuff and what have you, and basically kind of throw everything at the wall, and then they can sort of pick and choose, from there, and it's one way to work, but it might potentially put you in the rut of just designing more than what was necessary, or rather that you were just kind of being a little bit too sporadic and unfocused with what it was that you were, oh, that's why it's color dodge. Unfocused with your task, with what it was you were trying to kind of achieve. And so, asking the question of like, okay, is this something that we're kind of wanting, full blue sky, like carte blanche, I can, design any and everything that kind of comes to mind. We're just kind of looking for ideas. Is this something that we're wanting to like stick to a particular design language, or something that already kind of exists that we've done before, or what have you? Getting that clarification can just make your life a whole lot easier. One common thing that I would say to my students when I would teach at LCAD or the Art Institute was, the general idea is we want you to work smarter and not harder. So generally that's kind of how I would go about it. I kind of feel like the consistent, like prevailing theme a lot of the times when talking about like what you should tackle first, or how you should go about tackling certain tasks while like on the job or something like that. A huge part of it is because it's I guess
biz dev and game development and just things in the entertainment industry are so collaboratively driven. You know, you're in a team. Like the biggest thing is making sure that everyone is kind of on the same page, because time is money, and you don't want to be wasting anyone's time, let alone your own.
And now Elisa's mic seems to be fixed, so if you want to see if that answered your question, or if you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, you can unmute your mic and go ahead and ask, correct? Or not. So maybe it's not fixed. I don't know, but I'm sure that answered the question. Awesome. Sweet.
So we'll come in here with the lasso tool. So now at this point, I'm kind of wanting to, I want to start to finesse my compositions a bit. And so I kind of want to add in a little bit more contrast. Like I'm liking a lot of the little sliver of light that's kind of catching on these rock faces over here. So I'm just going to kind of color pick the relative color and value, and then just kind of start to echo some of those shapes. And since it's obviously like a little bit closer to camera than it is over here, I'm just going to kind of increase the size of said shapes to try to, again, replicate and kind of emphasize the perspective and the sense of scale. So I might want to come in here with a more refined brush, something that I can get a little bit more finesse, and then just start to hit it with like these little pockets. You know, one particular method that I actually have using a lot more as of late is I'll sometimes come in with like a really opaque brush that maybe has like a pretty big taper to it or something, and I might come in, you know, and just kind of make some pretty like liberal scribbles here, you know, say something like this, for example. I'm not going to keep this, but this is just for the sake of showcasing. And so then what I'll do is I'll actually then come in with like a smudge brush, and then I'll kind of come in and say sort of blur out those edges, so that way it kind of gives a little bit more of that seamless transition between the two, and then gets rid of that like super harsh edge that I get with that more opaque brush. So it's again one of those things where it's kind of, you know, Photoshop is like, I guess its greatest asset can sometimes be its greatest weakness. You know, it has so many different ways of doing so many different things that, I mean, I've been using it since like 2008, and there are still new tricks and methods that perhaps have even been around for years that all of a sudden I'm coming across, and it's like, oh my God, I could have been doing this whole time and I never knew. Okay, I'll come in here with another lighten layer because I'm just noticing here that some of these values are a little bit too dark, or darker than I would like, given how far away these are. So I'm actually going to do initially is I'm just going to punch them back a ton. And initially it's kind of looking like, wow, that's really too much. But a lot of the times, especially for like a more subtle layer like lighten, sometimes I like to go in pretty harshly, and then I'll just kind of dial it back with the opacity, and then kind of give some adjustments here and there if I want to try to integrate it a little bit more cleanly. And so then I'll just come in here. So this is going to be extreme, but that's okay. Again, it's kind of the same idea that I had with the lighten. I just want to try to emphasize that shift. So initially, I think if you guys even remember with how the initial demo looked like, these pieces were actually very similar, like they were kind of one and the same. But then by just making some value shifts in here, you can kind of emphasize or even create further depth than there was initially. And so like, because of the fact that I have like really, really large shape of this kind of like floral design, and then these are kind of smaller over here, I want to have something that is kind of emphasizing that shift or that depth.
I think just to let you know, we have about 5 minutes left, and that would put us at the 2-hour mark for this painting, which would definitely constitute it as a speed painting in my book. But
Dope. I'm gonna go in with one more color dodge layer and add something in a little extra. It could be cool. It could suck. We're gonna find out together. Yeah, let's go with the soft brush. Just see how this would look if it's seeming like the plant itself over here is kind of illuminating. So again, it's something that again, I'm trying to keep in mind of the fact that this isn't something that initially I thought about. So this is now creating you know, its own set of new problems, because now I'm starting to add in values and contrast in areas that I didn't consider compositionally. So I need to be mindful of how these new values and new colors and saturations are affecting the composition, and how the audience is kind of navigating through the image. So I'm going to try to err on the side of subtlety in terms of kind of this illuminated little effect that's going on, because I don't want to take away from this. I just want to add in this little extra tidbit of detail that just might assist in creating that little bit of extra depth. Do I have like a little, sure, we'll use the lily pads. So I can use it perhaps to give like a little scattering effect. And now perhaps I can just use to reinforce. So I'll come in here, smudge it out. Again, kind of get rid of that super sharp contrasting shapes. And also it acts as a really nice blending factor, especially with a lot of the fog that's in here. Okay, so that stuff's a little too hot for here. So I'm gonna grab a local value. No, we'll go back to the soft. Saturate it and punch it down more. So it's like if there are any instances with color dodge, if it happens to seem like it's punching up too hot too quickly, it's either that the value itself is too high that you're trying to paint with, or the value or the color saturation is it's too intense. So then you might just want to dial those back. Okay. So go here. Actually, do I have a better texture brush? I do not. Okay. Oh well. The idea that I had for it was to kind of get like a really sort of nice scatter brush and almost kind of make it look as if it was kind of scattering some pollen.
Hmm.
Just count, sure. I know that I probably have some better brushes to use for this, but it's just one of those instances to where, you know, in the time crunch, and you got to use what's available. Flip vertical, it's totally not the same layer that I replicated. Rotate it. Flip horizontal, totally different layer. So now I'll just kind of subtly downplay these. I'm gonna take the transparency layer off. And then I'm going to create a just tiny little motion blur to make it seem as if there's like the illusion of motion. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a direction to it. And so then I'll crunch the values down on here because they're a little bit closer and perhaps they're caught in the shadow. I'll just desaturate them so that way they fit a little bit more cleanly. And to give the illusion that it's like I guess that it's sort of as if it's from the camera, that sort of camera blur, then I'll just, oh, that's why. Take that transparency lock off. And then just hit up that motion blur even further. So that way you just kind of notice it in little pieces here and there, but it's not one of those things that's like glaringly in your face. Because again, added elements. So yeah.
Looking good.
So grab, don't want you, grab you again. And so I'll repeat motion blur, which is all Control F. So that way that stuff doesn't carry any focus and we start to lose that edge. I'll erase some stuff out so that way it makes it seem as if this is parallaxing behind this more mid-ground element here.
My allergies are going crazy. Just looking at that pollen.
Dude, Flonase, man.
I know.
I started using that recently because I can't handle springtime anymore. When it rolls around, it's like all the pollen comes out to play, all the bugs do, and it's like it's killing me now. Like Cali weather spoiled me with the lack of seasons. So now, like out on the East Coast, now that I have actual like seasons to deal with when it comes to that stuff, I have to prepare or I suffer the consequences. So just coming in here, reinforcing certain edges.
Logan, there's a question from the chat. Are we going to be able to send this image out to the attendees?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify on the promo code. We put it out there. It's actually for his class specifically for digital speed painting. There was a question that was asked about applying it to other classes outside of digital speed painting, but the code is actually particular for this particular class. So just a heads up.
Okay. I mean, I can noodle this thing until the cows come home. I think
Exactly
this
beyond the
kind
point.
of, I think that this kind of at least meets a nice resolution. I kind of feel like at this point I can stop at any point, and this painting at the very least still kind of clearly conveys, I guess, what it is that I'm trying to convey. So we have context in terms of what the subject matter is. We have for the most part an integrated sense of the elements, where things generally feel like it's all a part of the same image. There's some loose stuff here and there, but there's kind of loose stuff everywhere. So it's unified kind of in that aspect. And yeah.
Sweet. Well, no, thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys and gals for attending. We do appreciate it. If you have further questions, you can always email us at info@brainstormschool.com, and we can follow up with you. Give us a few days, and we will definitely get this recording up to the interwebs on our YouTube channel. And be sure to register for classes. If you're thinking about taking classes, they are going quick. So I would say hold your spot, get in there. I know our installment plan is subject to end relatively soon. So if you are trying to do installment payments on your classes, make sure that you jump on and register for that as well. So let's thank Logan in the chat. I know he can't necessarily hear it, but he can definitely see it, and appreciate it again. So thank you guys again.
Thank you, Logan.
Peoples.
No, thank you so much for kind of giving me the opportunity, Thomas, and thank you everyone for coming out. I know that it's late for some of you, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome, and thank you to Riddell and Big Am in the background answering questions in the chat, as well as making weird noises in my ear as this evening has been progressing. So pretty cool.
Thanks, Logan.
Oh, actually, Michi wants to know how big Logan is. He's like 7'5", dude. So yeah, he's ginormous.
Yeah, 7'5" sitting.
Yeah, don't mess with
Just
him,
flip
Michi.
those. Just flip it, and you have a more accurate.
Yeah. All right, brother. When you get out to Cali, we're chilling soon. So looking forward to your class and getting you back on Team Brainstorm, brother.
Cool.
All right. Talk to you soon. Peace.
All right. Thanks, guys.